civil unrest, a society rising up against an evil totalitarian regime. A strange, mysterious figure known as V, who's seeking revenge by taking out the corrupt people who pull the strings of society. A strange man seeking revenge for the wrongs that had happened to him, whom wears a Guy Fawkes mask. As well as an employee of a TV network who gets caught up along the way and becomes integral to ending fascism and embracing freedom. This is the plot to the action-packed fantasy movie V for Vendetta, a movie which came out in 2005, or actually it came out in 2006. It's tricky to pin the year on this one. And thanks to its themes of standing up against evil and corruption from the powerful, it has really resonated with people. So to celebrate, today we're going to explore 10 things that you didn't know about V for Vendetta. It's time to remember the 5th of November, the night Guy Fawkes tried to blow up Parliament in 1605, which in turn would eventually lead to the dystopian future world of V for Vendetta. So let's check it out, all while no doubt we all have one thing on our minds. How awesome does that French toast look that Hugo Weaving is cooking up? I mean, yeah, I know he has funky hands, but still. Anyway, let's do this. Number 10. Origins of the Vendetta. V for Vendetta was based on the comic book series of the same name. They were written by comic book writing wizard Alan Moore and were published between 1982 to 1989 and were released by DC Comics' Vertigo label. While the film feels more heroic and romantic in tone, the original comics were a lot more grim and nihilistic. Yeah, the comics are definitely a dark reality of trauma, vengeance, and anarchy. The story came to be because Moore and illustrator David Lloyd were sick of making war comics at that time, and Moore wanted to make a story about two opposing views at odds against each other. Lloyd incidentally sent Moore a sketch of Guy Fawkes, and this set in motion the idea of the main character in V for Vendetta to wear a Guy Fawkes mask and fight against a corrupt totalitarian regime in a near-future dystopian world. One that has been mostly destroyed by nuclear war. He is also less charming and more brutal in the comics too, like he will strike anyone who gets in his way, whereas in the movie they made him more sensitive and romantic. Number 9. The movie went into production because of Roadhouse. Yeah, as in Roadhouse. Movie-producing giant Joel Silver was obviously a fan of the V for Vendetta comics and saw potential in it becoming a movie, where he bought the rights to the comics in 1988. Now this was Silver in his days of producing big action spectacles, like Lethal Weapon, Predator, and Die Hard. In 1989, another one of his action movies was released, that of course being Roadhouse. And so, after the success of Roadhouse, Silver hired that movie's writer, Hilary Henkin, to work on a script for V for Vendetta. Needless to say, this early draft did differ from both the original comic and final film, and is said to be overly satirical and surreal. So yeah, this late 80s, early 90s cinematic version of V for Vendetta never went through. Number 8. The Wowskis take charge. The Wowskis were fans of the V for Vendetta comic book, and it's said that during the 90s, before they worked on The Matrix, they actually wrote a script for a V for Vendetta movie. But, as fate would have it, they wouldn't make the movie, well, at least not then. And as the 90s came to a close, the siblings had great success with The Matrix, which they directed and was produced by the as-mentioned Joel Silver. However, when the Wowskis were working on the back-to-back Matrix sequels, they went back to their V for Vendetta script that they had been working on in the mid-90s, and got the Matrix trilogy's assistant director, James McTeague, on board as V for Vendetta's director, where the three would work on this new modernized version of V for Vendetta. And Joel Silver must have been happier with this new version, as V for Vendetta went into production. Number 7. Natalie Portman was cast thanks to Attack of the Clones. Now, James McTeague had also previously been assistant director on Star Wars Episode II: Attack of the Clones, which came out in 2002. And while working on that movie, he met Natalie Portman, who starred in that film as Padme. And so this led to her being cast as V for Vendetta's main lead, Evie Hammond. Considering she was playing a British-born and bred character, and that Portman was American, she had to train with a dialect coach in order to develop a convincing English accent. She also had to shave her head for the part. I can remember at the time pictures of Portman surfaced with her shaved head, and there was lots of tabloid gossip and chit-chat about it. The attitude was pretty much, oh my god, Natalie Portman actually shaved her head, wow. Like, people just could not get their minds around this. In fact, Portman's shaved head had become such a talking point in regards to the movie. On the Australian DVD cover, the main focus was Portman's new look, as her and her shaved head take up most of the cover's space. To be fair though, let's be honest, she wore it pretty well. Number 6, the original actor who was cast as V dropped out. So when it came to the movie's secondary lead, the ambiguous V, the masked but charismatic anarchist out for revenge, the part was originally cast with British actor James Purefoy. However, he left 6 weeks after filming, supposedly due to another role. So he was replaced with Australian actor Hugo Weaving, who had previously worked with the Wowskis and James McTeague in the Matrix series, where he played Agent Smith. Weaving both physically replaced Purefoy on the set, as well as redubbing his lines. As pointed out by CBR.com, including Weaving and Purefoy, whose physical scenes still ended up in the movie, the character V would all up be played by 4 people. The other 2 being stunt performers Chad Stahelski and David Leitch. In addition to that, V for Vendetta also featured Stephen Ray as Inspector Eric Finch, Stephen Fry as talk show host Gordon Dietrich, and John Hurt as Chancellor Adam Sutler, this movie's evil big bad, and wow, he does it pretty good. Funny enough, Hurt previously appeared in the movie adaptation of similar story 1984, only in that one he wasn't the villain, but rather the protagonist. Number 5, drastic security measures. Most of V for Vendetta was shot on sound stages in Potsdam, Germany, as well as additional shots in Berlin. A great deal of the filming also took place in London. Now, the security checks were pretty full on with V for Vendetta. Each and every person who worked on the movie, including the A-list actors, had to have rigorous background checks. And going back to CBR, all weapons and props had to be heavily regulated. Even the tanks that were seen at the end of the movie had to be frequently inspected to make sure that they were unarmed and had no ammunition, as well as being guarded by armed officers. Look, I guess this is what happens when you film on location at the House of Parliament in London. They're gonna be pretty extreme with protecting the place. Not to mention the other problems that came with it. For example, filming at that location took 9 months of negotiations with 14 different government departments. And when filming at the locations of Parliament and Big Ben, the crew only had a small window of opportunity for filming those scenes, namely being shot over 3 nights in the early hours. I guess the government was scared that the V for Vendetta production would trigger off a real revolution or riot or something. Number 4, the toughest scene to shoot. Although V for Vendetta is a movie full of action, stunts and special effects, you may be surprised to know that the toughest scene to shoot was the iconic scene involving the red dominoes, in which when they topple down, looks like they form a giant blood-spilled V. Now, they probably could have gone with the CGI route, but the production were like, nope, to heck with that. We're gonna do this for realsies. So in order to shoot this scene, 22,000 dominoes were used, as well as the services of 4 domino assemblers. Damn, I didn't even know that was a profession. And all up, it took about 200 hours to set the scene up. Wow, a lot of hard work for what is just a few moments on screen. But ultimately, it's totally worth it as it looked great. Number 3, Alan Moore disowned the movie. It's no secret that Alan Moore really isn't a fan of movie adaptations based on his work, and what really seems to tick him off is the changes made to his stories when brought onto screen. And V for Vendetta was no exception. Now at that stage, From Hell and The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen had already come out, which were movies based on his works, which ultimately were failures. So at that stage, he was already really annoyed with the Hollywood system, having really despised those movies. But he was so appalled with the V for Vendetta movie, he requested his name be removed from the credits, and to further stand his ground of disapproval, he also refused any royalties. Yep, he was having none of it. He disowned the movie completely. His biggest problem with the V for Vendetta movie is the comics were his commentary on Thatcherism of the 80s, whereas he felt the movie was less Thatcher politics and more modernized Hollywood, which he seemed to really despise. In fact, going back to Wikipedia, Moore ceased all cooperation with DC Comics after Warner Brothers, who owned DC, didn't retract supposed statements of Moore endorsing the movie. So in other words, it was a shit show, and Alan Moore and his impressive beard were really pissed off. Number 2, the movie also led to protests. It seems that Alan Moore wasn't the only one who was pissed off by the V for Vendetta movie, as fans of those original comics were also outraged. So much so, they actually protested, where according to Scree Rant, the NY Metro Alliance of Anarchists protested the movie because they were not happy with how the story was adapted for the screen, mainly aiming their frustration at Warner Brothers and DC Comics. They felt the story was watered down, and that for the movie, the story lost its true meaning in order to make way for violent action scenes and special effects. Incidentally, the Guy Fawkes mask design seen in the movie would actually become commonplace in real-life protests in the years that followed, and is now an anti-establishment prop often associated with protesting and anarchy, for better or worse. Number 1, V for Vendetta's biggest rival wasn't the government, but a rom-com. No, seriously, a rom-com. One funny snippet about the release of V for Vendetta is when an early trailer of the movie was put together, actual music from the movie couldn't be used, it wasn't ready. So the trailer featured music from Batman Begins. Regardless, V for Vendetta was originally released at the Butt Numberphone Film Marathon in Texas in December 2005, but it would get a widespread release in March 2006. It was all eyes on the box office to see which movie would make it to the number 1 spot out of V for Vendetta and the more light-hearted romantic comedy Failure to Launch. Yep, 2 movies, of which are 2 polar opposites. Needless to say, V for Vendetta was the victor. The movie was a box office success, making nearly $135 million on a budget that sat somewhere between $50 to $54 million, and it would continue to be a huge hit in DVD and Blu-ray sales. The film got mainly positive reviews from critics, but it did have its negative reviews too, of which were mainly politically driven. I mean, look, that's bound to happen. It's a politically charged movie. I see V for Vendetta being like a movie very much in the same vein as A Clockwork Orange or Brazil, in that it's a cautionary tale of government corruption and power gone out of control. A dictatorship formed from a thirst of power, which can come from any political side if it succumbs to fanatical zealotry. And considering it's a movie about standing up to an evil elite regime, in later years it's become a very important movie to many people who feel that right now the story of V for Vendetta is more relevant and important than it was 20 years ago. So that was my look into V for Vendetta, and to give the movie credit, when I first saw it I was 20, so I wasn't fully cooked yet. And it was this movie where I learned about Guy Fawkes. All I knew about him beforehand is that he's the reason England has Bonfire Night. Yes, clearly there was obviously a lot more to this story than fireworks. Boom! Anyway, I'm Minty, and remember, the people do have the power to topple down seemingly powerful evil regimes, and really have been doing so ever since the dawn of humans. If you look in the pages of history, people power usually does win. See ya!